JJ could be good on there. All right, John, you ready to do some mailbag questions here?
Let's do it.
All right, mailbag time, everybody. If you want to email the show, houmailbag@gmail.com. It's summertime, but we're answering questions. And this is kind of a good time of year, too, because you can go a little off the page with some of your questions, although these are some pretty hardcore football questions that people have come up with for this week. And we got a few regulars emailing in. We'll bump them to the front of the line here. Charles Honeycutt, speaking of J.J. Watt, wanted to ask you guys, what is your favorite J.J. Watt memory? Everyone says the Bengal playoff game, and rightfully so. But me personally, it was the E.J. Manuel interception return. That was 2014. I was at that game, and I had my J.J. Watt jersey on. Good job, Charles. John, do you have a non-Cincinnati pick six playoff game favorite J.J. Watt memory?
I've got so many of them since I saw ever play. I liked it when he went in as a tight end, and everybody in the press box would say, JJ's going to get the pass, and yet he'd be wide open. He caught a touchdown pass in Cleveland, and we're up there saying, JJ Watt's going to get this pass. The Browns got to know it. Why are they going to use him? Boom. It's like Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel was the best ever as being another position player on defense, going in at tight end and catching passes. And JJ did it. And then they stopped because everybody was ready for it. And I have some great memories of Watt off the field, most involving charities.
Yeah.
But when he caught the ball, because he was so good at it and he took so much pride in it.
Yeah. The one you're talking about in Cleveland, John, that was a difficult catch. That was when he tippy-toed the sidelines and went to the ground. He played tight end at one point in his college career, so it wasn't totally foreign to him. But yeah, he was a remarkable athlete. Mine is probably same season as the E.J. Manuel pick six, but that Colts game, it was a Thursday night game, I think. The Texans lost that game on Thursday night. Fitzpatrick was the quarterback, but they were trailing by double digits, and that they got back in that game when JJ. It's in the box score. It's just a scoop and score. But if you go back and watch that play, there was a sack. Might have been JJ who got the sack. I don't even remember. But there was a fumble in the pocket by Andrew Luck. JJ was on the ground and scooped up the fumble and got up and ran it back for a touchdown.
I forgot about that one. You're right. That was a great one.
It sounds weird to say, but a guy his size literally falling on a fumble, getting up, and then being able to get up to top speed to run it all the way back is a pretty incredible feat. So that's mine. That's my non-Cincinnati pick six one. All right, next one, John. Cody Burnett. Tank Dell. Are there any pro comps that have been great at his size? Rookie Tank Dell. 5'8", listed at 5'8", John. I went and found an article about the top receivers under 6 feet of all time. And I don't think you can take 5'11" guys and use it as a comp there. But before you give specific names, the article that I saw had about 20 names. There weren't any 5'8", and the only 5'9" guys were Wes Welker, T.Y. Hilton, and Steve Smith. So that's not many guys Tank Dell's size to even compare him to, let alone, identify one and say, yep, that's the guy.
It's unusual. The Texans list him at 5'10". He's 5'8". He shrunk 2 inches from U of H. Amazing how that happens to almost every player where the colleges make him bigger. He was 165 at the combine, but he has such incredible quickness, explosiveness, acceleration. He's tough. He's smart on his route running. I think at first he'll be a return guy. Trendon Holiday from LSU. That was his name, right?
Yes, Trendon, yeah.
Trendon Holiday was, I think, shorter than 5'8".
He was 5'5".
And he was really good at that. But I think if your difference in 5'8" and 5'9", let's look at those three you just said. Mm-hmm. All of them were really, really good.
Yeah.
And Wes Welker, especially because he played in the middle. To me, he's the best slot receiver ever. And so that's who he would mimic the most. He'll get on a weight program and he might get up around 170, 175, but he's going to be banged around in the middle, but they got to hit him first.
Yeah.
And when he and John Mechie are healthy, we're going to see both of them inside. Mechie can play outside as well. And I'm guessing Tank's going to require a little adjustment because he's going to be hit by a lot bigger, faster, and more talented players than he faced at U of H. But there was a reason they drafted him. They love his big play capability.
He's the non first-round rookie I'm most excited to see in training camp. That's the one right there, is Tank Dell from the University of Houston. All right, next one, John, from Joe Q, another frequent emailer, asked this question. Is it harder, in your opinion, to find a great coach than finding a great quarterback? It seems clear that it's at least as hard, or at worst, almost as hard. And if that's the case, why do top QBs make so much more money than the coaches do? John, what's your take on that? Harder to find a great coach or a great quarterback?
I think it's hard to find a great coach. And, how many do you say are really great? How many are great because they got great quarterbacks? You go look out to history of all the great – would Bill Walsh have been in the Hall of Fame without Joe Montana and without Joe Montana?
No.
Would Chuck Noll be in without Terry Bradshaw? Tom Landry had Roger Staubach. Jimmy Johnson had Troy Aikman. It's hard to find a great coach. And the guy that did the greatest job of that is Joe Gibbs. Went to Super Bowls, won them with 3 different quarterbacks, none in the Hall of Fame, not even mentioned in the Hall of Fame. And he lost one with a different quarterback. So to me, that was, people will say I'm crazy. Vince Lombardi had Bart Starr, but he also had a lot of Hall of Famers around him. I don't think Bart Starr being the top 20 greatest quarterbacks in history. But if I see a coach that's great, is Bill Belichick great without Tom Brady? No.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm not saying he's not the best ever, but there have been so many great quarterbacks, and there are not so many great coaches.
Yeah. All right. Next one, John. Let's go to, because we're not going to get to all of these. So some of these we're going to just save for next week. This is from Downtown Milton, he calls himself. You, John, have been out at Texans OTAs and minicamp. Who do you think the captains will be this coming season based on how you've watched them interact with teammates? I like that question.
That's a great question, and I'll tell you what it is, but I'll also tell you I have a column on sportsradio610.com that addresses that very question.
Okay.
And 2 of them that I say don't be surprised if they're captains based on everything I've learned on and off the field, because the captains have to be really important in the meetings, helping players. Shaq Mason, the right guard, who everybody speaks highly of, and Robert Woods, they're both new players. Those 2 guys have kind of taken over as when it comes to leadership. And on defense, Jimmy Ward, obviously, he spent the last 9 years with the 49ers. He and D'Amico are tight. He gets to play safety, his favorite position. Last year, he played in the slot, and he didn't like it, and he said he didn't. But Pro Football Focus had him graded as one of the top slot corners in the NFL. Now he's back at safety. So he's a natural. And the other one, when the other one was drafted, I wrote a story about him for the Houston Chronicle. I think it might have been the last thing I wrote for the Chronicle about Jalen Petrie will be a captain in his 2nd season. Now, I know the coaches love Petrie. I know how much D'Amico loves Petrie. So I'm going to say Petrie and Ward are locks, and Shaq Mason and Robert Woods are locks, and they may take a couple more. Not sure who would be on special teams. It should be John Weeks, who going into his 14th year. He's been there longer than the Astrodome. And those would make 5 great captains. Too early for C.J. Stroud, of course, but those are my predictions.
Okay, so the locks for those 4 guys. Wow, John, that's a bold prediction. All right, so does this mean that Laramie Tunstall is losing the C on his jersey? Metaphorically, see it.
I think probably it's not a knock against him, and I think not. I thought last year that when Lovie Smith made him a captain, that was more because of Lovie needing help. What he did on the field, not off the field. I mean, he doesn't even show up in off season other than the mandatory 2-day mini camp. So, and they can have more than 4. You can have as many as you want.
Sure.
And maybe he still will be, but I don't think there's going to be 2 offensive line captains. And if they do name Laramie, it'll be just because of his stature as being the best player on the team.
Yeah, well, it says a lot about the culture transplant this team is undergoing, John, that the first 3 guys you named are all guys that they signed or traded for in the offseason. You know what I mean? They're not guys who've been in the building or been around the team, which I'm totally fine with. Speaking of which, John, not being at the offseason, 2 more questions. Tommy and Ito. John, in a previous episode of the Houtopia podcast, You were agitated that Sheldon Rankins wasn't at OTAs, and you seem to imply strongly that he could get cut when it comes time to trim the roster to 53. Give me a percentage chance of that happening. It seems like a long shot. Love the pod, guys.
It's definitely a long shot. It's only if it's a tie and other people emerge. They got a lot of defensive tackles. And Rankins played well last season. He started 15 games for the Jets. Texans are his third team in 4 years. To me, it just doesn't make sense. You have a new team, new coaches, and not come except for the minicamp. Coaches can't admit it, but they're irritated by that. Steven Nelson should have been there, and he wasn't there. He's the last year of his contract. Sheldon Rankins, 1 year contract. I would do everything I could. And the only way he would get cut is if other defensive tackles emerged.
Yeah.
I don't think they paid him 1 year and $10.5 million.
Yeah.
But he should have been here. And I'll guarantee you they're not happy about it, even though they can't say so. But maybe he'll be like Laramie Tunstall, just step in and play great. I don't think that's going to be the case because he's never been great, even though he was drafted in the first round. But it's not anybody else, Roy Lopez, Thomas Booker, Son Ridgeway, none of those guys float your boat for that position. But if somebody emerged, but no, I don't think he's going to be cut. I think he might not start.
Yeah. They gave him a $7 million signing bonus. I looked it up. So that, to me, the tie probably goes to the dead money.
He's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I don't think so either. All right, last one, John. I really like this one. Frank in Jersey Village. John, I heard you talking about the Dat Win documentary coming out soon. 2 questions. 1, are you in it? Are you in the doc, John?
I'm not in the doc.
Okay. I thought maybe you'd be in there like a vignette or something like that. Is maybe I'm assuming that's what Frank thought. I like this question. This is what I like. If you could pick one documentary to be made about the Texans, what would the main topic be?
The main topic would be, if it's about the Texans' history, how the franchise came about, stole it from L.A. The NFL wanted to go to Los Angeles. I wrote that bet the house they're going to L.A. Bob McNair kept assuring me that they were going to get it because he had spies in L.A. because knew what was going on behind the scenes, and he was right. But the NFL gave L.A. an exclusive period, sent Roger Goodell out there to live and get it all together, and he's hanging out with Tom Cruise and all these famous people, and I thought we'd never get the NFL. If it's about their greatest players, I think it would be about J.J. Watt and Andre Johnson. Johnson, who was great from the get-go, and had star written all over him, and Watt, who wasn't, who was a pizza delivery guy, who had a wreck and ate all the pizzas and got fired, and God told him, you'll never make it in football, and he didn't excel till he transferred to Wisconsin. So it's contrasting stories. Both of them are great, and they're going to be up there together. Dat Wins documentary coming out July 4th on ESPN, and it's going to be on the SEC network, is fascinating about his parents leaving Vietnam when the war was going on and getting on a boat and trying to sail out. We were like 14 people and his whole family trying to sail out to meet a boat from America that wasn't there, or they never found it. 2 weeks later, they land on the island and they say, is this America? And they said, no, this is Thailand. So there's a story about how they went to Thailand, to the West Coast, to Arkansas, to Michigan, and ended up in Rockport, Fulton, because his dad was a fisherman, and how Dad played football without his parents knowing it until he broke his arm and had to tell them the truth. And, of course, his career has been fantastic. One story he told off the air, I'll tell it here.
Okay.
As we ran out of time, Jim Myers, longtime assistant coach for the Cowboys, he died, and Dad met his wife. And his wife said, I think Myers had been in the Air Force. And she asked Dad, were you one of the children that my husband flew out of Vietnam in shoeboxes? And he said, no, ma'am, I was out of Vietnam on a boat. And she said that there were Americans and parents putting their children in shoeboxes, babies, to get them to America. And Jim Myers flew planes that had babies in shoeboxes. I'd never heard that. and I grew up during the Vietnam War,
Yeah.
and I just was blown away. Anyway, that win story is going to be tremendous, produced by the 12th Man, and I hope everybody checks it out.
That's a great tease, John. And that's on July 4th. It's coming out, you said?
July 4th.
Okay. Circling back to the original question. First of all, your J.J. Watt documentary, the whole preface about him eating the pizzas when he got into, his car broke down and he ate the pizzas and got fired. And the manager of the pizza store had the scouting acumen to take a look at J.J. Watt and say, you'll never amount to anything. My question was Bill O'Brien the one running the pizza store?
Oh, that's funny. Somebody, when J.J. got to be great and was winning his 3 NFL Defensive Player of the Year awards, I can't remember who it was, somebody tracked down that pizza guy and said, well, what do you think now? And, of course, he said all the right stuff.
Yeah, for sure. My two, and they're probably kind of interconnected. Well, let me back up. My big one that I would love to see, in part because I think I would be in it, and I think you would as well, because we lived through it, would be one about the DeSean Watson saga. It would be an incredible 30 for 30. I think it will be a 30 for 30 someday, especially if Watson's time in Cleveland ends on one extreme or the other. Winning a Super Bowl, or as the version of DeSean we got last year, and then it's one of the biggest failures of all time. And I think the Texans are tied into that as well. Like, if the Texans wind up winning a Super Bowl someday, the DeSean story becomes even bigger because of the butterfly effect of all that. But I think you and I would both be in that as people they interview. I know at the very least I would be in there because of the Rusty Harden interview, because that would be in the documentary, right? It has to be.
Yeah, and what was it that Rusty said that was the best thing?
Happy endings are not a crime. It's not a crime. Just because you go somewhere and get a happy ending, that's not a crime. There's a little bit of Lou Holtz in Rusty Harden. Hey, listen, that's not a crime. You get the happy ending. We had a very happy ending in 1988, won the national championship. It was unbelievable. That's my kind of happy ending.
You do a great job on those. I never get tired of hearing your Rusty and your Lou.
I may need to just do a podcast where I'm the two of them talking to each other the whole time. So the DeSean Watson, and then I think, like, honestly, as depressing it would be for Texan fans to watch, but just the whole Jack Easterby thing, like that whole thing from beginning to end.
Nobody's gonna watch a Jack Easterby documentary.
I think well, it's one where he ends up getting fired. So yeah, like, that's like saying no one's going to watch Game of Thrones. Everybody hates Joffrey. Yeah, until he chokes to death.
Talk about a happy ending.
That's unbelievable. It's Joffrey has a purple face. It's incredible.
I did do an interview for a documentary that's being filmed right now.
Yeah.
That Houston fans, well, everybody, it's about Bum Phillips and the Love You Blue era.
Okay.
And I did my interviews like 8 months ago, and I've seen the players. They did Wade Phillips last week on his birthday, and it's going to be, it should be great. The best one I've ever been in is, to me, one of the best I've ever seen, about facing Nolan. That one on Nolan Ryan was tremendous. They did an incredible job. And I think the guys doing the one on Bum, they've interviewed so many former Oiler players, coaches, media, fans. I can't wait when it comes out.
That'll be good. John, I watched the OJ chase with Lou Holtz. I've told you that before.
No, did you? What?
I watched the OJ chase with Lou
really?
Holtz. Yeah.
No, you didn't tell me that.
I never told you that. Yeah, it was a Friday, as you remember, because the Rockets were playing in Game 5. It was the Friday before his daughter was getting married. His daughter's one of my very best friends, Liz. We graduated together, and from Notre Dame, and so it was the Friday before. So they had the rehearsal dinner, which I was not invited to because I wasn't in the wedding party. But then after that, they had a party for like the next wave of friends. I wasn't in the inner circle, but I was in the next circle. So they had a party at a bar on campus at Notre Dame called Senior Bar. They rented it out. And so there's probably like 100 people there that were in town for the wedding. And it was like it was a bar, had TVs, had those big screen TVs, John, like back in the 90s that shot like green, blue, and red tubes at a movie screen. And I was watching Game 5 so intently. I hadn't moved to Houston yet. I wound up moving to Houston 4 months after this. I was still living in Connecticut. And I'm standing there and I'm watching this series because I've got like $500 on the Rockets to win this series against the Knicks. So I'm like the only one that's paying any attention to it. Everybody else is just drinking and partying. And I'm standing there, man, and I'm watching intently, like focused. And the screen splits. And all of a sudden on one side is the Rocket game. And on the other side is the OJ chase. We all remember what that looked like on TV. It was crazy. And I'm watching it. And all of a sudden I hear this voice next to me. This is unbelievable. This is the biggest fall from grace I've ever seen. And I look, and Coach Holtz is standing right next to me watching the OJ chase. And you got to remember, John, that OJ was one of the sideline reporters for Notre Dame back then because they were on NBC. And OJ was. You go back and watch the Florida State Notre Dame game, the game of the century from 1993, and you'll see two things in there: my brother kicking a 47-yard field goal, and O.J. Simpson on the sidelines for the two things everybody's talking about from that game. But O.J. was on the sideline. He was in production meetings in our building, So yeah, I watched the O.J. chase with Lou Holtz.
The last game that he wore his Bruno Magli shoes was here against the Oilers.
Oh, really?
I got a story about Dom Capers. Dom Capers, the head coach in Carolina.
Yeah.
Vic Fangio told me this. So one day, all the coaches were gathered around TVs in Vic Fangio's office watching the chase. And it was late. Players had gone. Dom sticks his head in there. And so what's everybody watching? They're watching OJ. And OJ's in his Bronco with Al Cowlings. And everybody in the country's watching. And Dom goes, what's going on with OJ? And every coach turned around slow and looked at him. And Dom had this confused look like, what in the world are y'all talking about?
Dude.
And they didn't say a word. And then he just left and went back down to his office.
That's how closed off coaches are, right? Like it's the biggest story going. Yeah, it was funny. On Facebook because the anniversary was last week. It was like Saturday, I think, June 17th, I think was Saturday or Sunday. And so Lou's daughter put up a picture like the wedding party, from that day. Like, hey, who knew that the day before this? Oh yeah, because it was her anniversary. So she posted a picture of the wedding party, and she said, "Man, who knew that the day before this, OJ would get chased down the freeway?" And a friend of hers who lives in Houston commented on it and said, "Yeah, I listened to a sports talk host here in town who tells that story all the time about being at your rehearsal dinner or whatever, watching the OJ chase." And she actually replied to it. She said, "David, such a small world. Sean Pendergast is my friend. He's such a great guy. I made a movie of him and some friends and my parents in a class project in college. He's dying for me to release it. LOL." That's true. We did she was a film.
Great.
She was a film major, and she had to do a silent movie as part of a project. And this is like our junior year. And so she recruited me and two of my buddies to be in the silent movie, which was filmed at her parents' house. And Lou Holtz was my dad in the silent movie.
Oh, that's great stuff.
It was great. Yeah. Lou, yeah. When we were getting ready to start filming, and it was like a Tuesday in the middle of the football season. And so Lou just got home from practice or whatever, and we're getting ready to start filming. And Lou's like, so what are we doing here? I'm Sean's dad. Or she's like, "Dad, it's a silent movie." "Oh, you're regular Cecil B. DeMille." So I'll tell one more quick funny anecdote about this, John. He's my dad in the movie. And the movie, it's a short, like, silent film. It's like 5 minutes long, right? And the whole plot line is my parents are leaving to go out for the night, and I invite my idiot friends over to have a party, and we all get caught. The end, right? It's like a stupid little silent movie. So the very first scene of the movie is Lou and his wife, Saint Beth, he would call her. Her name was Beth. He called her Saint Beth. They were leaving and saying goodbye to me at the front door. And so Liz is like coaching her dad up. Okay, Dad, it's a silent movie. So nobody's going to hear you. So you have to kind of talk with your body motions. You got to be exaggerated with your body motions. Okay, got it. So, ready, action. I hug Mrs. Holtz, and Lou comes up to me. They're leaving for the night. He puts his hand out to shake my hand because every dad shakes their son's hand before they go out. He grabs my hand and starts pumping it like a pump handle, and he screams, "See you, son! See you, son!" And Liz is like, cut. Like, Dad, you can shout as loud as you want. Nobody's going to hear you. It's a silent movie.
Oh, those are great stories.
It was funny, man.